Hi, I hope everyone is doing great. Today is our first lesson in the month of June. We're in a new month and also a new quarter. And so this quarter we will be dealing with leadership, and we will be looking at leaders of the children of Israel. And since the world is crying out for good leadership, it seems like a very appropriate time to start talking about how different leaders have led the people of God. So our lesson title today is Ehud defeats Moab. Ehud, that's a name we're not often heard before. Ehud defeats Moab. And it is taken from Judges, the 3rd chapter, verses 12 through 17, then verses 20 through 26, and lastly, verse 30. So, before we get started on today's lesson, I do want to put a disclaimer out there and let you know that this is going to be a violent set of verses that we're going to go through. And so if you're not comfortable with hearing some nasty details about what happened, you might want to just click off and wait till next week's lesson and jump back in about leadership. But really, the Bible is full of violent incidents. And so if we're going to accept the Bible as our holy text, we have to learn the whole context of what's in there. But I do want to put that out there. It is violent and gruesome, but it does sound like a spy movie or a spy story once you get into it. It's a very intriguing story to take a look at. Like I said, we're going to be in Judges, the 3rd chapter. And so the book of Judges is a book of history, and it gives the early history of Israel after Joshua dies. And in the book of Judges, the children of Israel, they constantly keep messing up and they keep going against God. But God keeps delivering up judges who will help them and lead them out of their mistakes. And so today we're going to learn about one of those judges, Ehud, that is in our title of our lesson. So if you got your Bibles, take them out. I'll be reading from the King James Version because that's the version that we use for Sunday school. And let's just get started. And today I thought I would do it a little bit different and just read the verses along and talk about them as we go along. So let's read verses 12 and 13. Start with verse 12. And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, against Israel, because they had done evil in the sight of the Lord. And he gathered unto the children of Ammon and Amalek, and went and smote Israel, and possessed the city of palm trees. So verse 12, it starts out telling us the children are messed up again. It says that they did evil again in the sight of the Lord. So they're being disobedient. And God, he allows something to happen to him. He allows Moab, that king is named Eglon, he now allows that king in the Moabites, to defeat Israel. And that not only do the Moabites, but they go along and get some other folks to come along with them, the Amalekites and the Ammonites. And they all join forces and they take possession of a city called the City of Palms. And that really was Jericho. And the previous book in Joshua, we know that Joshua had defeated the city of Jericho, and that was under the children of Israel's protection. But here we see that these Moabites, Ammonites, and Amalekites come against Israel and they defeat them. And so reading on in verse 14, we see that so the children of Israel, they served Eglon, the king of Moab, for 18 years. So not only were they defeated, then they also had to stay under the control of the Moabites and King Eglon for 18 years. That's a long time. So moving right along, let's read verse 15. But when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord raised them up a deliverer, Ehud, the son of Gera, a Benjamite, a man left-handed, and by him the children of Israel sent a present unto Eglon, the king of Moab. So we see a name there. That name, Ehud. He's the second judge of Israel, because we know that they messed up again. The first judge of Israel was Othniel, and here we have Ehud is the second one. And we know something about him. He's from the tribe of Benjamin. It says he's a Benjamite. Then there's another little detail about him. It says he's left-handed. Throughout history, being right-handed has always been the majority thing. Being left-handed is something that's unique. So it tells us that he's left-handed. And Ehud, he's going to take something to the king. He's going to take a tribute, a gift, most likely a monetary gift, to the Moabite king. And so that's another thing we see about him in verse 15. And so let's keep read verses 16 and 17. But Ehud made him a dagger which had two edges of cubit length, and he did gird it under his remnant upon his right thigh. And he brought the present unto Eglon, the king of Moab. And Eglon was a very fat man. So we see Ehud, he makes a weapon. He makes a double-edged sword. And it says that he puts it on his right thigh. Remember, he's left-handed. So if he's in battle, he's not going to have his sword on the left side. He's going to have it on the right side so he can pull it out and go to work with it. And so whenever, that will become a very important detail later on, but he has it on his right thigh. And he's concealing it because it says it's under his garment. And he's going in verse 17 to present this gift to the king of Moab, Eglon. And it gives us some details about him. It says he's a very fat man. I don't think I've ever seen that in scripture before, describing a person as a very fat person. But we find out Eglon, we know that Ehud is left-handed, and we find out the king of the Moabites is a fat man. So our lesson doesn't include verses 18 and 19, but I wanted just to give a brief summary of what those verses say. And it says that Ehud, he goes to present the gifts, and then he sends all the people that came with him to present this gift, he sends them away, and he goes back to the king after he's given the gift, and he says, "Your Majesty, I have a secret message for you." So the king, he orders all of his servants to leave as well. So that gets us back to our next verse in the lesson, and that's verse 20. So let's read. And Ehud came unto him, and he was sitting in a summer parlor, which he had for himself alone. And Ehud said, "I have a message from God unto thee." And he arose out of his seat. So Ehud, nobody's around, it's just him and the king. And he tells the king, "I got a message from God just for you." That sounds real good. And so the king gets up. Let's see what happens next. Let's read verses 21 and 22. And Ehud put forth his left hand and took the dagger from his right thigh and thrust it into his belly. And the haft also went in after the blade, and the fat closed upon the blade, so he could not draw the dagger out of the belly, and the dirt came out. Remember, we talked about Ehud, he's left-handed. He's putting his weapon on the right side. He did that as an element of surprise. The guards, when they checked him, I'm sure did not check his right side. They were looking for a weapon on the left side. So when he meets with the king with nobody around, he pulls that weapon out. It's unexpected. And he stabs him so hard that it says the heft went into the body. The heft is meaning the handle. So and remember, we talked about Eglon, the king was a very fat man. So he stabbed him so hard that he couldn't even pull the weapon back out. He just, he had to leave the whole thing. And then in the King James, it says the dirt came out, meaning that the insides of the king, it was such a violent thrust that the insides of the king came spilling out. Remember, I warned you, it's going to be a little gruesome. So that's what Ehud does. He stabs the king of the Moabites. So let's keep reading verse 23 and 24. Then Ehud went forth through the porch and shut the doors of the parlor upon him and locked them. And when he was gone out, his servants came. And when they saw that, behold, the doors of the parlor were locked, they said, surely he covereth his feet in his summer parlor. So Ehud, after he does what he does to the king, he sneaks out and he locks the door behind him. And the king's servants, they go to check to go into the parlor and to the chamber where the king is, and they see the door locked, so they think he's probably covering his feet, meaning he's probably getting dressed, meaning he's maybe taking care of some personal business, and that's why he has the door locked. So let's keep reading on to verse 25 and 26. And they tarried till they were ashamed, and behold, he opened not the doors of the parlor. Therefore they took a key and opened them. And behold, their Lord was fallen down dead on the earth. And Ehud escaped while they were tarried, and passed beyond the quarries, and escaped unto Sarioth. So the Eglon's servants, the Moab servants, they waited as long as they could. They says they were embarrassed until they were ashamed or embarrassed. And when I read that, I was like, why would they be ashamed and embarrassed? I guess they felt like they were the servants and they weren't taking care of the king's needs. Maybe that's why they were embarrassed. But they knew that they had taken too long to check on the king. So they unlocked the door and they found the king dead. And while they were sitting there waiting and all that, Ehud had done slipped off and he was gone, and he was in the city of Sarioth. So verses 27 through 30 are not included in our lesson, but I'll give a brief summary of what those verses say. Ehud, once he's away from where the king was, he goes and gets the children of Israel, and he tells them, the Lord has delivered your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand. So Israel goes on to kill 10,000 Moabites. And then verse 30 is our last verse, and let's read that one. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest 80 years. So Moab gets defeated by Israel. The leader of Israel at that time was Ehud. He was the judge of that time. And under his leadership, they had peace for 80 years. That's a long time for peace. Remember, our topic this quarter is leadership. What is something that's unique about Ehud's leadership? It's the thing that makes him unique. He's left-handed. Some people would view his left-handedness as a weakness, but it's not. It's not a disadvantage for him. He actually uses it for an advantage. I was thinking about a real life example of how in leadership you have to use the thing that others might perceive as a weakness, the thing that makes you unique to help lead God's people. And I thought about, since we're talking about judges, I thought about Thurgood Marshall. He was the first black Supreme Court justice. One of his disadvantages in life was being born black. He was not allowed to go to a Ivy League law school. He went to Howard University, a predominantly black, historically black college, and had the first law school in the country for blacks. Well, one of the things that the dean of Howard University's law school, he wanted his students, they always had to know the Constitution, frontward and backwards. Because of that, the thing that disadvantaged him of having to go to Howard University for law school came into an advantage because he knew the Constitution so well that he argued so many times in front of the Supreme Court, they eventually had to put him on the Supreme Court. So that thing that was looked as a disadvantage of him being black and not allowed into a predominantly white law school worked out for his advantage and the advantage of God's people, black people in America. So that's a real life example of how a unique thing about you, others may use it as a weakness or view it as a weakness, but it's actually a strength. So when we are called into leadership positions, that thing that makes us so unique, whether it's our voice, whether it's the way we think, the way we present ourselves, whatever it is, take that unique thing about you and do what God has called you to do. So that is our lesson for today. It's a good lesson. I enjoyed it once I got into studying it, because I don't actually remember reading it and really studying it in depth. So I really enjoyed it today. Hope you did too. Next week our lesson will be the call of Gideon, and it will be from Judges, the 6th chapter, the 11th through the 24th verse. And we will continue on all quarter looking at different leaders in Israel. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I hope you have an awesome week.